Well, here we are again. It's time for Chapter 7 of The Lion's Paw by Rob White. And I again want to thank Leslie Saunders and the folks at AW Inc. for allowing us to read this for you folks at home who are stuck away from school because of the coronavirus. And maybe this will be something that you'll enjoy. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, because I sure am. And remember, you can order your own copy of The Lion's Paw by Rob White from www.thelionspaw.org, www.thelionspaw.org. And we're ready for Chapter 7. Chapter 7, Ralph Ray has drawn his little miniature drawing to go with the very first page of the chapter. As somebody with their feet in a bucket, who might have sore feet and want to be soaking them? Do you remember? Ben had closed the cabin tightly so the lights wouldn't show. And it was hot. But it felt good after the cool of the river's evening mist. Penny was sitting on the edge of her bunk, her pants legs rolled up, her feet in a bucket of brine. She lifted up one dripping foot and looked at it. It was pink and swollen a little. "Do you think this stuff will get them tough enough to walk on tomorrow, Ben?" she asked. "There won't be much walking to do," Ben said. "It'll take all night for the paint to dry, so we'll have to stay here all day tomorrow." "What'll we do?" Nick asked. "Work?" Ben shook his head. "Just lie around and wait for dark." "Then since there's nothing to do at all, I don't see why I couldn't go hunting for an alligator," Nick said. "You can, but while you're hunting for a little one, be sure a big one isn't hunting for you." Nick looked less brave. "Don't they make any noise?" "Not in the water. And when they get up where you are, they just slide along in the mud." "Well," Nick said, "I better wait until somebody can go with me. They can look behind and I can look in front." "I'll go with you when my feet get tough," Penny said. She leaned back on the bunk until her shoulders touched the wall. Tiredness just seemed to come down on her like the water from a hot shower bath. It flowed all down her. It flowed all down her muscles, and her eyes just wouldn't stay open. She would open them as wide as she could and look all around the little cabin, but soon they would close no matter what she did. "A girl at the orphanage had a doll," Penny said sleepily. "When you tilted it, its eyes would shut. After a while," she yawned so wide her jaw cracked, "after a while, the doll got broken and we could look inside of its head and take the eyes out. The eyes were the bluest things you ever saw. But in the back, they had a wire, and on the end of the wire was a piece of lead. And that's what made them open and shut." She yawned again and wiggled her toes in the brine. "That's what I've got on my eyes, lead weights," she said. "When I lean back, my eyes just have to shut." Ben, sitting at the table, stretched and yawned also. Then he scratched his head furiously and stood up. "Me for the sack," he said. "Good night." "You aren't going to bed?" Nick asked. "Who'll I talk to?" "Penny," Ben said. "Good night." "She doesn't know anything about alligators or anything," Nick said. Ben looked at Nick. "Nick, my boy, you're just a young man. But me, I'm an old man, and I needs me sleep. I'll talk to you about gators tomorrow." "All right," Nick said, his voice resigned. "Good night, Ben," Penny said. Then she turned on Nick. "Don't you ever get sleepy or tired or anything?" Not me, Nick said. I'd go gator hunting right now if I knew where to go. Go to bed, Penny said. She lifted her feet out of the bucket and let them drip. Then she wiped them on her shirt tail. After you turn out the light, open the hatch, Penny said. Hatch? Oh, door, Nick said as he switched off the light. From her bunk, Penny heard Nick slowly going to bed. After he was in it, he said, "This is a real Navy, isn't it? Hatch and everything." "Well, that's what Ben calls it," Penny said. "We've got to learn all the words," Nick said, "like sack. He means his bed when he says that. And starboard and port." Penny was almost asleep when Nick said, "I think the boat looks better all black this way. Looks more piratey." Penny managed to say before she went to sleep. In the morning, the black paint was dry, and the new name, for which Ben had cut a stencil so it was neat and professional looking, gleamed white at the stern and on the two life preserver rings lashed to the stays. Lion's Paw. Nick was the first one up. For a while, he played around the boat, trying not to make any noise. But he would forget, and his bare feet would sound like horses walking around on the deck. So at last, Penny and Ben got up also. After breakfast, they wiped all the varnished wood with soft cloths and fresh water, swabbed the deck, flemished down all the lines, and put what Ben called a Sunday furl in the sails. By the time they finished, the sun was coming down hot through the green roof of leaves and limbs above the mast. The three of them sat in the cockpit and scrubbed all the galley gear until even the iron frying pan gleamed. Penny's feet were much better, but she soaked them in the brine again after lunch while Ben gave them both a lesson in boat handling, the nautical names for things, and knot tying. After that, he took Nick out in the dinghy and taught him how to row while Penny sat with her feet soaking and watched Nick try to make the little boat go straight up and down the creek the way Ben did. When they came back, Ben lashed the boat down on the cabin skylights. "We'll sail when the tide turns about 11 tonight," he announced. "That'll put us into Stewart around 3 in the morning if the wind holds. So by dawn, we'll be in the St. Lucie and on the way." "What's the St. Lucie?" Nick asked. "It's a canal. I'll show you." Ben brought up the maps, which they had learned to call charts, and he showed them the way they had to go. At a little town on Florida's Atlantic coast, they would enter the St. Lucie Canal, which would lead them to the huge Lake Okeechobee. They would cross the lake and enter the Coosawhatchee Canal and then the Coosawhatchee River to Fort Myers and the Gulf of Mexico. Ben stopped his moving finger there, and then he said, "We start looking for the Lion's Paw." Well, I'll stop long enough to show you that map again that's in the front of the book on the end pages. And so this shows, a section of the bottom of the peninsula of Florida. And over here is the Atlantic Ocean. And there is the St. Lucie Canal connecting to the big old Lake Okeechobee, the 10th largest lake in America. And from it, the Coosawhatchee Canal connects to the Coosawhatchee River, which flows into the Gulf of Mexico and over to Sanibel and Captiva Islands, where the Lion's Paw can be found. So that map in the front of the book kind of helps you keep track of things. Now I have lost my place. I let my finger slip out, so let's see if I can find it again. It's right here. Let's see. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Nick looked up from the chart. I'm glad we're going so far away from the Iguanopro, but Ben, what good is a lion's paw anyhow? A lady gave me a seashell one time, and I kept it for a while. Remember, Penny? But then I threw it away because it wasn't good for anything. I used to think that too, Ben said quietly. Then my father began sending his shells to me, and he used to write about them. Wait a minute. Ben went into the cabin and came up with the steel box in which he kept all his father's letters. He got out a letter and settled down cross-legged in the sun. He read, "Dear Skipper, I'm sending you another batch of shells today, and I hope the FPO gets them to you. They should just about drive Pete and Mary out of the house by the time they get there, because I haven't had time to clean them, and the people living with me aboard ship have declared that I can't clean any more shells in the cabin, and I can't much blame them. I got the face mask you gave me for my birthday, and the box full of stinkers is the result. I can't tell you where I found them, but I had a good time doing it. Whenever I get off the ship and into the face mask, everything seems to change. The ship is so hot, so crowded, so noisy. If it isn't the bugle, it's the gongs. And if it's not the gongs, then it's an airplane engine or dozens of airplane engines. And if the airplane engines are all right, it's the 20 millimeters, the 50 calibers, the 40s, the 5-inch, and sometimes it's the whole works. Guns, motors, bugles, gongs, bells, buzzers, catapult. You know, my sack is about 1 foot below the catapult sheave. I have to climb up and slide under the thing, and if I should hump up my stern while they're catapulting, I would immediately become a much thinner man. They catapult the planes with an acceleration of 0 to about 90 miles an hour in 100 feet. So by the time the catapult goes down my bunk, it's going 90 and making a fearful racket. They usually catapult just after I've gone to sleep after standing a midwatch. The Navy is a very noisy place, as I said. There isn't a minute of the day or night when something or somebody isn't making a loud official noise. But under the sea, it is silent, or almost. The faint crackling noise, I only hear at first. It's like eggs frying with the galley door shut. I wonder what makes that noise. Is it the chewing of all the millions of things in the ocean? They must eat all the time. I hope these shells are reaching you, Skipper. I often wonder when I go ashore and find old FPO in some muddy tent. At one place, the post office was just where the officer in charge of it happened to be. Or after we've been on an island a while, there's a big Quonset hut with Fleet Post Office and nice letters. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I often wonder if these little boxes I put down and a sailor with nothing on but khaki shorts picks up ever reach you. They have so far to go, these little boxes full of cotton and fragile shells. I don't even live in the same day with you now because we are well on toward Japan. I don't even live in the same hemisphere half the time. Sometimes I start to think about how many miles it is, but after I get past 5,000, I stop thinking about it. 5,000 just about reaches the Pacific coast. When I get back, we'll do some cataloging, if we can find the names of the shells. We'll take the Heart of Lee and sail off about 100 miles from the coast. Then we'll heave or two and just sit there, undisturbed, and figure out what kinds of shells are which. And I'll tell you where I got them, from which of the hundreds of islands we visited in pursuit of the little yellow man. I found this shell or that one. In the meantime, you get busy too. I'm sending you a book called Florida Seashells by a real conchologist named Ethel Snyder, who lives with a little dog named Dolly Varden over on Sanibel. I think before I get back, you'll have time to find them all except the lion's paw. Ben stopped reading. That's what he thinks about them, he said quietly. They mean a lot to him, and to me too. They're beautiful, Ben said. Have you got any? Penny asked. Ben looked at her and smiled. I got them all, he said. Sometimes FPO took months, but they all came, even the last box full. He sent me that just 10 days before he got to be missing. Will you show them to us? Penny asked. I want to see a face mash, Nick said. Ben laughed. That's a good name for it. After an hour or so, you feel like your face has been mashed, but it's a mask. I'll show you. Ben came up with a big wooden box with a hinged lid and a shoebox. He put the big box carefully down on the floor of the cockpit and opened it. There was a layer of white cotton, and he lifted that away and laid it aside. In a shallow wooden tray divided into sections were dozens of seashells. Penny looked at them, expecting to see the kinds of shells she knew about, the white, bleached, curved shells or gray, wrinkled oyster shells. But in the sunlight, the shells in the box were wonderful. They were all colors and shapes, from deep orange to the faintest tinge of blue and green. There were round, glass-smooth shells, which looked like the eyes of cats made with jewels. Ben lifted out tray after tray of shells. Some of them were fantastically shaped, with long spines. Others were as clear as glass and tissue thin. There were tiny little clear blue balls, the little dish-like shells with mother-of-pearl gleaming inside. There were conchs, cowries, volutes, olives, tritons, murices, pectines. There was a chambered nautilus with part of the outer shell cut away so that they could see the little silver rooms one after another. There were hundreds, thousands of seashells. Penny had never seen anything so beautiful, and she sat on her haunches for a long time just looking at them. Without saying anything, Nick held out his cupped hand. Ben picked up one of the cowries, a domed shell with a faint blue tinge and a clear polished gold ring around the top, and dropped it into Nick's hand. Nick sat down carefully, balancing his hand, and stared at the shell. Then, with one gentle finger, he turned the shell over on its back so that he could see the perfectly formed opening of deep, satiny purple. Does anything live in there? He asked, and didn't know that he was whispering. Something did, Ben said. I bet he hated to die, Nick said, giving the shell back to Ben. Ben put all the trays back into the box, put the cotton pad on again, and closed the box. Then he opened the other one. There were 3 rubber face masks with heavy glass fronts. He tried one on Nick, the rubber covering his face in a circle from the top of his forehead down around his eyes and along his upper lip. Nick peered out through the heavy, clear glass. I can see good, Nick said. Penny tried on the other one, and she and Nick put their faces close together and looked at each other through the glasses. I want to try mine in the water, Nick said. Too muddy. Can't see a thing. Wait till we get to the Gulf, Ben told him. Will we use these to hunt for lion's paws? Nick asked. Ben nodded. We'll find one, Nick said. We can see them lying around. Ben nodded and put the face mask back in the box. Won't Dad be surprised when he comes back and we've got one? Ben asked. We won't show it to him at first. We'll just wait until he says something about not having one, and then we'll show it to him. Penny looked at Ben. What does he look like? She asked. My father? Well, he's big. He's more than 6 feet tall, and he weighs almost 200 pounds. But he isn't fat. He's got more muscle than anybody you ever saw. He can pick up the dinghy and hold it straight out with one hand. Does he look like you? Ben shook his head. He's sort of good looking. He's got sort of gray eyes with little wrinkles around them from from sailing so much, and he's got white teeth. One of the front ones is broken off a little from when I jibbed her all standing and the boom hit him. I was only a little kid then, though, and didn't know much about sailing. Are you like us and haven't got any mother? Nick asked. She died when I was born, Ben said. Ours didn't die until I was 2 years old, Nick said. 3, Penny said. I remember. You do not, Nick said. Yes, I do. She was in a white room with some flowers and had long black hair. Maybe so, Nick said. Didn't your father ever get married again? Penny asked, ignoring Nick. Ben shook his head. He almost did one time, but she always got seasick on the boat, so he didn't marry her. Didn't he work or anything? Didn't he have a job? Nick asked. Did he just sail around all the time? Sure he worked. He built sailboats. He built this one. Nick looked around the boat in amazement. He did? How? He knows how. He built the boat that won the Bermuda race. He built a lot of boats. Huh, Nick said. That's funny. I never thought about how a boat got to be a boat. I guess I thought they just grew. Did you help him? Penny asked. After school and in the summer, but most summers we would just sail around. Dad said we were looking for customers to buy his boats, but we hardly ever went where there were very many people. Just you and your father on this boat? Penny asked. Ben nodded. Penny looked at the slanting bands of sunlight coming down through the forest above them. Ben, she said, her voice low, what's it like to have a father? How do you mean, Penny? I mean, well, does a father tell you not to do things and to do things and to go to work and to get up and to go to bed? Does he boss you around? Well, Ben said, he was the captain of the ship. Did he love you, Ben? Ben looked at her. Well, I guess so. We didn't talk about it. Did you love him? Ben stirred restlessly and looked at the top of the dark river, and then he nodded. Didn't he ever say, Ben, I love you? Didn't he ever say, Ben, my son, you're a fine boy? Penny asked. Ben shook his head, and then he smiled. Once in a while, he'd say, Mate, we've got a fine crew aboard this vessel. And there wouldn't be any crew except me. And sometimes, Ben went on slowly, he'd put his hand on my head or my shoulder, not for long, just put it there and then take it away. How did you like that? Penny asked. All right, Ben said. Penny thought for a while, and then she said slowly, when he comes back, do you think he'll mind about me and Nick? We don't get seasick, Nick said. He won't mind. He'll like you, Ben said. Are you sure? Penny asked. Ben looked at her. Yes, I'm sure. He must be a nice man, Nick said. My father is the finest man in the world, Ben said quietly. And that's the end of chapter 7.